What's up and welcome to Sam Miller Science, where you're joining me just over a decade into my personal journey of working to bridge the gap between metabolism, macros, muscle, and medicine, all while helping coaches scale the impact that they desire and deserve. If you are here, thank you so much for listening and for trusting me to help you elevate your coaching game or to lead you in your transformation to realize your true potential. In either case, each week I'll be sharing my methods, models, and message to serve as leverage for your specific goals. Without further ado, let's get on to today's show.
We don't rise to our goals, we often return to our baseline settings. Now, most people hear that reference and they think it's just identity or mindset only. What's rarely discussed is that this is the literal physiology behind it all, especially when it comes to health and fitness transformations. Your body has a thermostat too, and not just like a set point. This is really homeostasis reframed, because homeostasis doesn't always mean optimal health. It means consistency and preservation. Because human physiology evolved to detect patterns, preserve energy, and avoid risk. This really is expectation and conditioning, meaning your body doesn't always respond to exactly what you want when you experience a given stimulus. Instead, it responds to what it expects based on your past conditioning. So the body doesn't always interpret these present moments in isolation. It's predicting the present based on some of what's happened to it in the past. This could be the nervous system, the endocrine system, the immune system. They're asking and evaluating what usually happens next in these situations. So if the answer has historically been stress or threats or instability, the system's going to prepare accordingly. The brain and nervous system are predictive, not purely just reactive systems like a lot of people think they are. So rather than waiting on something to happen and then responding, the brain is constantly surveying, using prior experience and integrating historical patterns, and it's anticipating what's most likely to happen next. This is often referred to in neuroscience as predictive processing or anticipatory regulation. Now, looking at this from a functional nutrition perspective, really this shows up in stress responses being driven by perceived safety, not just current inputs. And it's not just safety, but here are some examples that may be aligned for you if you are a health coach or someone who has health goals. Total daily energy expenditure is adaptive. It's based on historical energy availability, not just today's intake. Your HPA axis reflects cumulative stress loads, not just single day acute stressors like getting stuck in traffic. Insulin signaling adapts to repeated exposure. Glucose handling reflects your past dietary choices, activity levels, exercise, sleep, and inflammation. So familiarity is really what the body prefers. Familiar stress over unfamiliar calm. So this is about predictable strain over unpredictable relief, the uncertainty of it all. Known dysfunction over unknown change. Now, unlike the thermostat in your house, your body's not just going to recalibrate overnight just because these conditions improve briefly. Now, maybe you feel a little bit less stressed from an acute perspective, but your physiology needs those conditions to stay different long enough to rely on the expectation of that future change. So when it comes to stressors, not all stress is created equal and impacts the body's thermostat a bit differently. There's a framework that's often used to describe this in stress biology, and people talk about the novelty, unpredictability, the threatening nature, or sustained and repeated nature of different stressors. This matters because acute stress is not the only problem. It's this repeated nuts type stress that is. So nuts is the novelty, unpredictability, continued threat of stress, and sustained over time. So when stress is novel, unpredictable, threatening, and repeated, the nervous system learns this environment requires vigilance, both mentally and physically. That learning becomes a literal expectation for your body, and that expectation, it's almost like being coded or hardwired into that physiology. Now, you're not broken or stuck, but we're going to talk about how modern stressors or non-ancestral stressors in our clients' lives really aren't always rooted in survival, but they're impacting us still from a physiological perspective. This could be irregular sleep schedules, constant notifications, inconsistent routines, poor amounts of light exposure, just artificial light instead of sunlight. This is all some form of unpredictability or just not really what the body is craving here. Now, this also is true in relationships and environments, because relationships are one of the strongest conditioners of this expectation. Healthy relationships are consistent, or at least somewhat predictable, fairly safe, non-threatening. They're associated with oxytocin and even in some cases dopamine. They can be more parasympathetic, especially when there's stress management present. This signals the body, hey, you can kind of stand down here or take a load off. Whereas unhealthy relationships, it can be emotionally unpredictable, chronically threatening, and those threats are repeated over time where there's that constant state of vigilance. They're characterized by sustained cortisol elevation. It's a more sympathetic fight or flight state to be in. This is heightened adrenal signaling. And the body doesn't necessarily separate these emotional threats from those physical threats particularly well. And you can't out-supplement a relationship that keeps the nervous system on guard 24/7. This is especially true early in life. We see early conditioning of the HPA axis. The thermostat doesn't just start in adulthood. This happens to kids too and is repeated through early childhood exposure. Childhood environments that were unpredictable, emotionally threatening, chronically stressful, that all meets the criteria for the 4-part NUTS framework for stressors. Over time, the nervous system learns that this level of vigilance is required, and that becomes the baseline. Later in life, calm can feel unfamiliar, sometimes even uncomfortable when you're in those kind of silent or quiet situations. Not because the person's broken, but because their physiology was conditioned early, and changing that takes repetition and accumulation, not just brute force or intensity. And this is why single lever fixes, like just throwing a bunch of supplements at something, tend to fail. People try to override a conditioned system with one variable, like diet alone or training alone or supplements alone is something we see a lot on social media. But thermostats don't change from intensity, they change from sustained environmental engineering, and the body adapts accordingly. Let's use supplements like adaptogens as a great example of this. I've got nothing against adaptogens, but it's something that oftentimes people will just throw this at a stressful situation. So they hear about adaptogens, ashwagandha, rhodiola, holy basil, so they add one, and sometimes briefly they feel better for a little bit. The mistake is they assume that the supplement changed the body's physiological thermostat. Now, it might slightly, but not to the degree that we need to experience permanent relief. So let's use the analogy of a loud factory. The machinery is running nonstop. It's chaotic. The noise, it's just all around you, all encompassing. Now you put on noise canceling headphones and the sound just drops. You feel relief. Your nervous system's going to settle down slightly, but the factory didn't shut down. The machinery is still running and the conditions didn't really change except you put on headphones, so your perception did. Some of us don't want to leave the noisy factory because that's our familiar environment. So leaving, stepping outside, getting away from the noise feels unfamiliar. So most people would rather just put on headphones. Now, what the body is actually learning, and in these situations, people typically ask things like, well, is my cortisol lower? Well, if sleep is inconsistent, if food intake is unpredictable, if training stress is still mismatched to your recovery, and if relationships still feel threatening in your life, if the calendar is still chaotic, then the answer isn't just about cortisol in that acute moment. It's about the environment and the stimulus causing that response in the first place. This is why clients will say things like, well, that supplement worked for a few weeks, or I tried that training program and it worked for a month or so, or I think I need a higher dose of this now, or I'm rotating my supplements, but nothing sticks. That's because a single lever cannot override a multi-input system. Now, it might be able to throw a wrench in it for a minute, but the HPA axis does not care that cortisol was blunted for a few hours. It cares whether the threat exposure has actually decreased over time. So your metabolism, or just your metabolic health, internal health, and physiology cares about whether energy availability is consistently sufficient from your food, your macro and micronutrients. Thermostats, especially in terms of our internal health, change from consistency. Only environmental stability does that. So regular sleep, predictable meals, appropriate training stress, circadian alignment, relational safety, reduced unpredictability. And I'm not saying you have to eat the same things or train the same things all the time, but when those inputs are consistent, it helps to adjust this thermostat. And the supplements will actually work even better because they're no longer fighting the actual system. So remember, the body isn't necessarily defending health or dysfunction. It's not trying to make this worse for you. It's simply defending homeostasis, or the status quo that it's built from your repeated choices and exposures. When stress is familiar, the body is going to maintain that level of vigilance required to handle the stress. When safety is repeated, that's a totally new stimulus, and the system allows for that adaptation. You're not broken, nothing's broken, your metabolism's not broken, your hormones aren't broken. The system is just doing what it was designed to do. If you enjoyed this episode, if it was helpful for you, if it reframed your perspective around our physiology and how our body responds to our environment and our stress, please leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen. Or if you're watching on video, please give a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. There's also that notification bell typically. And leave a comment if you had a main takeaway or if you liked the story or presentation in the way that I shared this with you. You can always share this with a client or even on your social media. Tag me. I'm at Sam Miller Science on just about every single major platform. And remember, the show can reach more people and continue that ripple effect of coaching when you share the word. I appreciate you tuning in inside today's episode. Hopefully this was a helpful reframe in terms of how our physiology is much like a thermostat. Many of our choices and the stimulus in our day-to-day lives is impacting our ability to achieve our goals and feel our best. Thanks so much, guys, and I will talk to you in the next show.